Breaking news, the Pokemon Company have revealed the next League Battle deck, and it is Gardevoir EX, which is probably one of, if not the most requested League Battle deck, but it's coming out at a very weird time. I have a lot of feelings about this product, how it's built, how it's coming out around right after rotation, and let's go into it. We're going to do a deep dive, look at the deck list, talk about the pros, cons, some of the notable cards that are missing, and what this could look like in a post-rotation world. I'm Jed from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, let's get into the details of this. First off, this is coming out on April 19th, 2024. It's going to retail for $19.99 US. And we can see on the front, we've got the 3 copies of Gardevoir EX, 1 Lumineon V, and 1 Radiant Greninja. And just to preface this, League Battle decks are pre-made decks by the Pokemon Company that are meant to be competitive out of the box. These are the decks you buy as a foundation for the deck you want to play in an IRL event. You make some adjustments and you get rolling with a deck that could potentially win tournaments. And up until right now, at the time of this recording, before rotation, Gardevoir EX is one of the strongest decks in the game. And here's kind of a look at some of the major components here. We're getting 3 copies of Gardevoir EX. That's probably 1 more in a pre-rotation world. Post-rotation, maybe we need 3. I don't know. We are getting a copy of Mew EX, which is fantastic. Can be used in a lot of different decks besides Gardevoir, but does work in Gardevoir as well. Lumineon, another splashable card. You can put this in a bunch of different stuff. Has proven to work well in Gardevoir as well. And Radiant Greninja is the best Radiant Pokemon and just one of the best Pokemon in the game. Really strong lineup of hollow Pokemon that go in this deck. We can see the other bits like the dice. The dice are really pretty. The deck box is kind of cool, and so on. We also have a look at the back of the box, and we've got the full deck list here, which I'm sure you really want to look at, and you're like, what the heck, I can't read this. Don't worry, we're going to look at it in PTCG Live. I've got the whole deck here, and I'll put the list to this in the description of this video as well if you want to copy paste it. And we'll do a card by card breakdown, everything that's in here, talk about the pros and cons, and I do have some information from Japan which kind of gives us an idea of what this could look like post rotation. So we'll start with Gardevoir EX. This has the ability Psychic Embrace, where as often as you like, you can attach a Psychic Energy from the discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon. They take 20 damage for each energy you attach, but you get to accelerate energy pretty much out of nowhere. And we're going to be powering up a slew of different attackers that benefit from having that damage on them. Now, you could also attack with Gardevoir EX for 2 Psychic and a Colorless, does 190 damage, and you recover from all special conditions. The special condition thing probably not really going to matter. 190 is an okay amount of damage in a jam, and maybe post-rotation we will be attacking with Gardevoir a little more. But right now we don't really attack with Gardevoir. In order to get set up to Gardevoir EX, we do have 4 copies of Ralts. Now, we are using Memory Skip Ralts here instead of the other one, Teleportation Burst. I think there are going to be some people who have issues with that because Teleportation Ralts has 70 HP and Memory Skip Ralts has 60. However, it does have the move Memory Skip where you can just force your opponent's active Pokemon to not be able to use one of their attacks, and there are a lot of primary attackers that only have 1 attack, so you can just shut that off, which is pretty cool. I think I'd still prefer the 70 HP, but 60 HP Teleportation Ralts is fine. We have 4 copies of Refinement Kirlia here. This is a very big deal because it has the ability Refinement, where you get to discard a card, draw 2 cards. It's one of the best draw engines in the game, and we are running 4 copies of this now because Mirage Gate or Mirage Step will have rotated by the time this is out. So 4 copies of Refinement Kirlia. Fantastic. Radiant Greninja is a fantastic way of drawing cards. Concealed cards lets you discard an energy, draw 2 cards. Again, we're getting more energy in the discard pile to power up our attackers, helps us draw more cards, and we're not really using its attack here at all, really just here to discard energy, but this is a deck that really needs that. Fantastic inclusion in this deck. We've got Cresselia here with the Moonglow reverse attack, where for 1 Psychic Energy, remove 2 damage counters from each of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. You get to do some pretty decent snipe damage that Manaphy cannot block, which is really nice. However, you do have to attach energy to your different psychic Pokemon, and then you have to make sure that that energy doesn't get stuck. There's a little bit of strategy with how you dish out the damage in order to then heal it off and move it off to one of your opponent's opposing Pokemon, but this can be great to snipe something off the bench. We also have Lumineon in the deck. Not every Gardevoir EX deck currently plays Lumineon, but some of them do to great effect. It has the ability Luminous Sign. When you put this onto your bench, you can grab a supporter card of your choice, which is really nice. One of the more interesting inclusions in this deck is Mew EX, where that's not a card that we always see in Gardevoir. Actually, it's kind of fallen out of favor in recent times, but people have experimented with this in Gardevoir decks. It has seen appearances in top 8 Gardevoir builds, and it's not a bad inclusion here, especially in a post-rotation world where we get the ability Restart, lets you draw up to 3 cards, and its genome hacking attack for 3 colorless energy lets you copy an attack from your opponent's opposing Pokemon. You can make some really cool plays happen, like boss up your opponent's Moonlight, Shuriken, Radiant Greninja and copy that attack, and then snipe for take out 2 prizes, 2 smaller Pokemon. You can copy Giratina's Lost Impact and just wipe a Giratina V-Star off the board. Lots of cool possibilities with Mew EX as a versatile attacker. The most interesting inclusion here, though, is Drifloon, where this is a card that we don't see in Gardevoir right now, but based on what's happening post-rotation, I think this is going to be the main attacker going forward. It has the attack Balloon Blast, where for 2 Psychic Energy, it does 30 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And we have, with 70 HP, Gardevoir does 20 damage for each attach. You're going to be doing 180 damage maximum. However, you can attach a Bravery Charm, which this deck comes with a couple of them, and increase its potential damage output to 300 damage. And that's a really good number. You're going to be taking out a lot of stage 1 EXs. You're going to be taking out all of the V-Stars. You're going to be taking out the basic EXs and Vs as well. Charizard's still going to be a problem. Anything north of 300 is going to be a problem. There are ways of manipulating the damage so you can get even more damage on there, whether it's a Hero's Cape, a Luxurious Cape, Moonlit Hill, or some other sort of healing option to get to those numbers. But for the way the deck is currently built, you're going to max out at about 300 damage, which is pretty good. It's a little harder to get there. You're going to have a tool attached there, and you are also going to not be able to hit as hard, but this might be the best straight up raw attacker that Gardevoir has going forward. For trainer cards, we have a really strong selection of trainers in here. We've got Bravery Charm, which increases our basic Pokemon's HP by 50. The big combo here, of course, is Drifloon, where we want to increase its HP up to 120. We can get damage for Gardevoir up to 100, and then that's going to do 180 damage base. Well, it's 180 damage base. With the charm, it's going to boost its damage up to 300, and if we can find ways to manipulate it, whether it's Moonlit Hill to heal a little bit, other sort of healing cards, or any other modifier, even Damage Pump I've seen in some post-rotation lists, we could do even more damage than that, but Bravery Charm is our primary way of hitting those bigger numbers so we can uptrade on multi-prize Pokemon. We've got 3 copies of Professor's Research, discard your hand and draw 7. It's a little bit of a aggressive build. I think currently Gardevoir builds use like maybe one, some don't even run Professor's Research at all. Whether you choose to run the full 3, maybe even up it to 4, I don't know what it's going to look like post-rotation, but Professor's Research, not a bad card to have into Gardevoir. Lets you see a whole bunch of cards and even get some energy in the discard pile. So I don't necessarily hate its inclusion here in this heavy of a count, even though there are other cards I might like to see more of besides Professor's Research, but I'm not mad at Professor's Research being here. 2 copies of Artazon, which lets you bench a non-rule box basic Pokemon from your deck and put it right onto your bench. It's a staple stadium in Gardevoir. There are some other stadiums you could run here as well, but 2 copies of Artazon is fine. We'll talk about some of the notable exclusions in a little bit. 2 copies of Arven, which is going to be a card that will be more important to Gardevoir post-rotation. Lets you grab an item and a tool card, put into your hand, and shuffle your deck. With this deck having a heavy reliance on tools like Bravery Charm, Arven becomes even more important, helps us grab those Bravery Charms when we need them, also help us grab Rare Candy when we need them as well. 4 copies of Nest Ball helps us search our deck for a basic Pokemon and put it onto our bench, then shuffle our deck. There are a couple of Gardevoir builds out here that currently don't run Battle VIP Pass, but most of them do. You're probably fine with 4 Nest Balls. However, there is a new Buddy Puffin card that we'll talk about in a sec that could be here instead of Nest Ball, but 4 Nest Balls I think is totally fine here. We got 2 copies of Boss's Orders, where you get to switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active. Gusting a Pokemon off your opponent's bench to hit them is fantastic. There's a different gust option like Counter Catcher that could be in here as well, but 2 copies of Boss is fine. 4 copies of Iono for hand disruption. Both players shuffle their hands, put it to the bottom of the deck, and draw equal to the number of cards they have remaining. This is a fantastic card in Gardevoir. Lets you see a fresh set of cards, and then you can continue drawing cards with the refinement Kirlias and see a ton of cards each turn. Jacq is an interesting inclusion, to say the least. This appears in a lot of their other lower level decks. To see Jacq in a level 3 deck, a little sus. However, it's not necessarily bad here. You get to grab 2 evolution Pokemon and put them into your hand, and this can help you get Kirlias. It can help you get Gardevoir EX. So for that purpose, I'm not necessarily mad at its inclusion here. You'll probably want to take this out though once you customize the deck, but for the purposes of just starting out, it's fine. 1 copy of Super Rod lets us recover basic energy as well as our Pokemon, up to 3 in total, back into our deck. And most Gardevoir decks run 2 of these. We're only getting 1. That kind of sucks, but we're okay with 1 for now. 4 copies of Ultra Ball, discard 2 cards, and grab a Pokemon of our choice. 4 ofs is a staple in Gardevoir lists, so that's fantastic. We have 3 copies of Rare Candy as well. Helps us set up a little faster. We get to skip the Stage 1 evolution and just go from Basic to Stage 2. Most Gardevoir lists these days only run 2 copies of Rare Candy. However, in a post-rotation world where we don't have Mirage Step Kirlia, 3 Rare Candies is maybe more beneficial. I don't hate having more Rare Candy in the deck. That's totally fine. Last but not least, we have 13 Psychic Energy. This is a little heavy relative to the amount of energy that Gardevoir needs. Most of its attackers are going to be like 3 to 6 energy. Like, yeah, Drifloon with the charm can hold a maximum of 5 if you're starting clean and you've got the charm on and you're loading it up with energy. Maybe they put in extra copies of energy because we are playing a heavy count of Professor's Research and there's a higher chance you're going to be discarding more than you need. You can probably tone this down a little bit and squeeze in some of your own text down to like 10 perhaps, but I don't necessarily hate the energy count being at 13. Overall, just looking at this list as is, there's some notable exclusions here, but I totally get the game plan for Gardevoir EX in a post-rotation world. We're largely setting up the Kirlias to draw cards. We get Gardevoir EX for the energy acceleration. We're going to be largely using Drifloon to attack. However, in a jam, we can attack with Gardevoir EX. We can make some really cool surprise plays with Mew EX as well and get a snipe with Cresselia. The trainer card lineup is maybe not perfect, but it's pretty solid, and the energy count, maybe it's a little high, but I don't necessarily hate the amount of energy they have here. I think this is, considering post-rotation and we don't fully know what Gardevoir is going to look like post-rotation, this is a solid build, and I think this is going to play pretty great out of the box, and it does have some room to grow going forward, though its competitive viability may be a little bit of a question mark going forward. But just out of the box, I think Gardevoir looks awesome, and I think this is a more complete deck than the Miraidon League Battle deck out of the box, which is probably your other major League Battle deck choice in the immediate term. This one might be the one to get. I'd say between Miraidon, Palkia, and Gardevoir, I think this was going to be the best of the 3. Now let's talk about some of the notable exclusions from the League Battle deck / cards you can put into the League Battle deck to make them stronger. Scream Tail is a staple attacker in Gardevoir these days, where its Roaring Scream attack does 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So it can do up to 160, and it can bench snipe as well. It can hit harder than Cresselia on the bench, which is really nice. However, it gets blocked by Manaphy because Manaphy blocks damage, and that I can see why Pokemon went with Cresselia over Scream Tail, but a lot of decks that are or a lot of Gardevoir decks these days are running both Cresselia and Scream Tail, and I've even seen some that run just Scream Tail and get rid of the Cresselia. Would have been nice to get it in the League Battle deck, but I'm not too hurt that Scream Tail was left out. Speaking of bench protection, this deck does not come with any bench protection whatsoever, so we do not have Manaphy to block damage, we do not have Jirachi to protect against damage counters, stuff like Sableye, Lost Mine. I think that if you're just starting out and you're learning how to play, this is your first competitive deck. It's maybe okay to play your first couple casual games without the Manaphy and the Jirachi, but as soon as you start playing competitively and you're going to run into attackers that can attack the bench, I would absolutely add a copy of Manaphy and Jirachi to your League Battle deck. Gallade is a card that I think will start to see some play in Gardevoir in a post-rotation world. Its Buddy Catch ability lets you grab a supporter card of your choice and put it into your hand, and its attack is not bad either, Swirling Slice for 160 damage, and you get to move an energy off of Gallade and put it to one of your bench Pokemon. Not a bad attacker, really great ability, and because we're not evolving into a regular Gardevoir anymore, we're evolving to Gardevoir EX, and we only need really one of those on the board at a time, there is room to squeeze Gallade in there. Counter Catcher is the preferred method of gusting in Gardevoir EX. You're going to be behind on prizes more often than not, and you can play an item-based gust while also saving your supporter for like something else. So you can gust a bench Pokemon into the active with Counter Catcher, and then do Professor's Research to draw 7 cards, or play Iono, whatever that combo is. Counter Catcher, more often than not, is better than Boss, but Boss is fine for the deck, and definitely add a Counter Catcher or 2 into your League Battle decks going forward. Buddy Poffin is a new card that will come out in Temporal Forces. It lets you bench 2 Pokemon from your deck that have 70 HP or less. This is going to be our replacement for Battle VIP Pass. I don't necessarily hate the fact that the deck doesn't come with Buddy Poffin. I think that a lot of players will opt to go with a 4 of Buddy Poffin in the deck, but there are already Gardevoir lists that are doing well that don't run Battle VIP Pass that'll probably be just fine with Nest Balls. So this is definitely an optional inclusion. I think a couple of these wouldn't hurt though, if not a full playset going forward. Moonlit Hill is a new stadium that came out in Paldean Fates, lets you discard a Psychic Energy and heal 30 damage from each of their Pokemon. And this is going to be a way of getting that damage on Drifloon down, so you could do even more damage with that attack. So definitely something to consider. Collapse Stadium forces both players' benches down to 4 Pokemon, and while this does sound not ideal, this is a great way of getting the Lumineon off of the board so that you do not have a 2-prize liability that your opponent can gust up and knock out. And also just it's disruptive to your opponent, as most decks want to go 5 wide. So Collapse Stadium, a fantastic inclusion in Gardevoir. It's not in the League Battle deck, but definitely something you'll want to squeeze in there. Lost Vacuum is a card that's currently in Gardevoir lists to get rid of stuff like Path to the Peak. However, with Path to the Peak rotating out, there's less of a threat of Gardevoir getting shut down because of stadiums or tool cards for that matter. So maybe you take out the Lost Vacuum, you don't need it anymore, but there might be times where stuff like your opponent's Bravery Charms or Hero's Capes, Luxurious Capes could get in the way of you taking that one-hit KO. Maybe Lost Vacuum is still something you want to squeeze in there, but it's not as essential as it is in pre-rotation times. Luxurious Cape is another way to increase damage output to your Pokemon, your Drifloon, or if you add Scream Tail in there as well. It boosts your Pokemon's HP by 100, but when it gets knocked out, you will be coughing up 2 prizes. This essentially turns one of your attackers like a Drifloon into Zacian V. However, the trade-off is, yes, you're going to cough up 2 prizes, but if it helps you win the game because you can climb the ladder and one-hit KO that Charizard or something like that, then Luxurious Cape is absolutely worth it. And I think this is going to be a staple in Gardevoir going forward, because adding an extra 100 HP to your primary attacker is going to be awesome. Hero's Cape is an A-Spec card that will debut as part of Temporal Forces. I also think this is going to be a staple card in Gardevoir decks because it gives any of your Pokemon plus 100 HP. Unlike Luxurious Cape, which only works on non-rule box Pokemon, you can put this onto any of your Pokemon. You could give Gardevoir EX 410 HP if you really wanted to, and there might be times where you do. But the other thing is you get plus 100 HP, and there's no extra prize you have to drop. You're only allowed to have 1 copy of this, but I think for Gardevoir decks, it is absolutely worth it to have Hero's Cape in there. Yes, there are some notable cards that were not included in the Gardevoir deck, but overall, I think that the League Battle deck out of the box is pretty awesome. Even if you're not playing Gardevoir, there are just so many good staple cards in there, such as Radiant Greninja, such as Mew EX, such as 4 copies of Iono, Boss's Orders, Professor's Research, Arven, Bravery Charms, and even if you were just pillaging it for spare parts, it's still an awesome deck, and if you want to play Gardevoir, this is fantastic. That being said, the million-dollar question is, does it survive rotation? And based on the research I've done so far in Japan, where they already have gone through their rotation, I'm not so sure. And some of the evidence to suggest that maybe things aren't looking so great for Gardevoir. Here's the tier list that Book put out. Shoutouts to Book, who do an awesome job covering the Japan scene for the world. And one of the things that's really eye-catching about this tier list is that Gardevoir's not on this list at all. Up until rotation, Gardevoir has been a staple on this, usually in the S tier or the A tier, but it's not even mentioned at all here, which is very concerning. And then they also put out these metagame lists where they show off the percentage split of decks across different tournaments and across different tournaments with different player counts. And the top has always been Charizard, and then Chen Pao's been here to kind of counter Charizard, but Gardevoir has not appeared on any of these charts, which gives me great concern that Gardevoir may not be a player in the meta going forward, at least in the immediate term. I still think Gardevoir is a strong deck, and I'm excited to pick up this League Battle deck and build it out to what I think could be a post-rotation build. However, there are some big concerns that maybe Gardevoir, I think in the immediate term, Gardevoir is not going to be the powerhouse that it currently is. However, I think Gardevoir in and of itself is just way too strong of a Pokemon to count it out forever. And whether it is immediately after rotation, maybe international players will find the secret sauce to bring Gardevoir back to life, or future sets bring it back into prominence. I think that Gardevoir is going to take a bit of a dip here, but I think it will. I'll keep my fingers crossed that it will come back, and the Gardevoir League Battle deck is a great way of having the foundation for that deck going forward. So yeah, really weird, kind of a weird choice for League Battle deck going in. I so thought it was going to be Charizard EX, and I would not count out Charizard EX as a deck going forward. But I guess if you were going to do Gardevoir, I probably would have done it. I would have done it earlier if I could. I understand that they probably didn't do it because of questions of what Gardevoir was going to look like post-rotation. This is their best answer to what it could be. And yeah, this deck is going to largely, it's going to survive at least this next year. I think a lot of cards in this list are going to rotate in 2025. You still have a solid year to play it, and it's a really strong foundation for Gardevoir going forward. And I guess the questions of whether Gardevoir is going to be competitively viable kind of remains to be seen, but just looking at it out of the box, I think the deck as is, trying to build the best post-rotation Gardevoir deck you can with the limitations of League Battle decks like 6 Hollows and so on. I think the Pokemon Company have done a great job of that. But what say you? Are you excited for the Gardevoir League Battle deck? Are you picking it up? Are you like disappointed because it's coming out too late? Are there any cards that aren't in the League Battle deck that have made your decision a little tougher? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In3rdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at In3rdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website In3rdPerson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.